We welcome our guest today, who has joined us to share a deeply painful personal story.
Funerals have a strange way of slowing time. Every sound feels distant, every movement heavier than it should be. The day we buried my grandmother, the sky was the color of wet concrete, the kind that threatens rain but never quite delivers it. It felt appropriate, like the world itself was holding its breath. My grandmother, Eleanor Hayes, was the steadiest presence I had ever known. She raised me after my parents died when I was 12, worked 2 jobs without complaint, and somehow still found the energy to sit beside my bed every night, asking about school as if nothing else in the world mattered. She wasn't wealthy, she wasn't powerful, but she was unshakable. Or, at least, that's what I believed. The service was small. A few distant relatives, some neighbors, people from her church. I stood near the front of the chapel, hands folded, listening to the pastor speak words that floated past me without landing. I had heard them all before. She lived a full life. She was deeply loved. She will be missed. None of it prepared me for the silence that followed when the casket was finally lowered. That silence was when I noticed him. He didn't look like he belonged there. Everyone else wore black or muted gray, the unspoken uniform of grief. He wore a dark navy suit, tailored sharply, with a silver tie clip that caught the light when he moved. He stood near the back, hands clasped, watching, not the casket, not the pastor, but me. At first, I assumed he was a colleague from my grandmother's past, maybe someone from work. She had lived a long life. There were bound to be people I didn't know. Still, something about his presence made my shoulders tense. After the service, people gathered outside, murmuring condolences. I shook hands, accepted hugs, thanked people I barely recognized. My chest felt hollow, like grief had scooped something out and left nothing in its place. That was when the man approached. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice calm, professional. I looked up, surprised. "Yes." "My name is Thomas Caldwell. I'm an attorney." He paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. "I represented your grandmother." That stopped me cold. "I'm sorry?" I said. "My grandmother didn't have a lawyer." His expression didn't change. "She did, for several years." I felt a flicker of irritation cut through the fog of grief. "Look, today isn't really—" "I understand," he interrupted gently. "This is not a conversation I would normally have at a funeral, but your grandmother was very specific about the timing." The word specific echoed. He lowered his voice. "She asked that I speak to you immediately after the service, privately." I glanced around. My aunt was talking to someone near the parking lot. No one was paying attention to us. "What is this about?" I asked. He met my eyes. "Your grandmother's estate." I almost laughed. She didn't have an estate. She rented her house. She drove a 15-year-old car. A faint smile touched his lips. "I'm aware of how it appears." That was the moment I realized something was deeply wrong. "I don't feel comfortable discussing this today," I said. "I'm not asking you to discuss it here," he replied. "I'm asking you to come with me. 10 minutes, that's all." Every instinct told me to say no. This was the worst day of my life. I wanted to go home, sit in silence, and pretend the world had stopped turning. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. "She told me you would hesitate," he said quietly, "and she told me what to say if you did." My throat tightened. "What?" He leaned closer. "She said, 'Tell him the truth about his father begins today.'" The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. "My father died in a car accident when I was a child." "Yes," he said evenly, "that is what you were told." The noise of the gathering faded. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "You're saying she lied to me?" I asked. "I'm saying," he replied, "that your grandmother carried secrets she believed were meant to die with her, unless you were ready. I stared at the chapel doors behind him, then back at the grave in the distance. She asked me to give you a choice, he continued. You can walk away now, go home, nothing changes. Or you can come with me, and everything does. I thought of my grandmother's hands, worn and steady, of the nights she told me stories, always careful about the details of my parents, always vague about my father. I swallowed. Where are we going? I asked. To my office, and then, possibly, somewhere much farther. I looked once more at the place where my grandmother was buried. Okay, I said. I'll come. And in that moment, I didn't know it yet, but my life had already split into...
The drive to Thomas Caldwell's office was quiet in the way only uncomfortable truths can make it. Rain finally started falling. Light at first, then steady, streaking across the windshield like thin cracks in glass. I watched the city blur past, my thoughts circling the same impossible question. If my father didn't die the way I was told, then where had he gone? Caldwell's office was downtown, tucked into a narrow building between a bank and a closed bookstore. Nothing about it suggested secrets or life-altering revelations. It looked ordinary, safe. That somehow made me more uneasy. Inside, the space smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Shelves lined the walls, filled with neatly labeled binders. Caldwell gestured for me to sit, then disappeared briefly into another room. When he returned, he carried a thick manila folder. This, he said, placing it gently on the desk between us, exists because your grandmother refused to let certain matters be forgotten. I didn't touch it. She trusted you, I said. Why didn't she just tell me? Caldwell folded his hands. Because she believed timing mattered more than truth, and because she was afraid. Afraid of what? Of what would happen to you if you knew. That answer sat heavily between us. He opened the folder and slid out a single photograph. It was old, slightly faded. A man stood beside my grandmother, his arm around her shoulders. He was younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, tall, dark-haired. He looked like me. My stomach dropped. That's not possible, I said, though the resemblance was undeniable. That is your father, Daniel Hayes. I stared at the photo. My grandmother looked happy in it, truly happy, not the careful smile she wore later in life. You said his name was Michael, I whispered. She did, because that was safer. I pushed the photo away. You're telling me my entire childhood was built on a lie? I'm telling you, he said calmly, that it was built on protection. He pulled out documents, legal filings, dated and signed. My grandmother's handwriting appeared again and again, steady and precise. Your father was not killed in a car accident. He disappeared. Disappeared how? I asked sharply. Caldwell hesitated, voluntarily and under pressure. He explained slowly, carefully, as if each word carried weight. My father had been involved with a company that later came under federal investigation, financial crimes, powerful people. When things began to unravel, he was offered a choice: cooperate quietly and vanish, or become a liability. And my grandmother agreed to this? I asked, my voice tight. She didn't agree. According to the file, my father was placed into a federal protection arrangement. Unofficial, unrecorded in public systems. His identity erased. His past severed. And me? I asked. What about me? Caldwell met my gaze. You were the reason your grandmother accepted the terms. The room felt too small. She raised you knowing, he continued, that contact with your father would put you at risk. Not emotionally, physically. I laughed, short and bitter. So instead, she let me believe he was dead. Yes. I rubbed my face with my hands. Every memory suddenly felt altered. Every bedtime story, every avoided question, every time she changed the subject, it all fit now. "She told me to be honest," I said, "to live with integrity." "She did," Caldwell replied, "and she did, in the only way she believed she could." He slid one final envelope across the desk. "What's that?" I asked. "A letter," he said, "written for you, to be opened only after her death, and only if you came with me today." My hands trembled as I opened it. "My sweet boy," it began, "if you are reading this, then you were brave enough to follow the man I trusted when I could not trust the world." I felt my throat close. "I lied to you not because you were weak, but because you were strong, and strength, when exposed too early, draws danger." Tears blurred the words. "Your father loved you. Loving you was the reason he left." I folded the letter, unable to continue. Caldwell watched silently. "There's more," he said, "but that is for later." I looked up. "Why tell me now?" "Because," he replied, "the agreement that protected your father expired last month." The words hit like a punch. "Expired?" I repeated. "Yes," he said, "which means the people who once wanted him silent may want answers again. And because your grandmother is gone, there is no one left legally shielding you from the truth." A cold realization crept in. "You're not just here to explain, you're here to prepare me." He nodded. "Your grandmother asked me to offer you another choice." I leaned back, exhausted. "I already made one today." "Yes," he said, "and the next one will be harder." He stood and walked to the window. "Your father is alive," Caldwell said quietly, "and he wants to see you." The room went still. I stared at him, my heart racing. "When?" I asked. Caldwell turned back to me. "Soon," he said, "if you agree." I thought of the grave I had just left, of a woman who had carried this burden alone for decades. "I need time," I said. "You have very little," he replied. And for the second time that day, I realized my life was no longer mine to postpone.
I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my grandmother's handwriting, the photograph of a man who shared my face, in the word Caldwell used so carefully. Expired. My morning exhaustion had settled into my bones, but clarity hadn't come with it. At 9 sharp, my phone rang. "It's Thomas Caldwell," he said when I answered. "I hope you didn't expect peace after yesterday." "I didn't expect anything," I replied, which seems to be the problem. He told me to meet him at his office again. When I arrived, he was already waiting, coat on, briefcase in hand. "We're not staying here," he said. "Too many records, too many questions." We drove north, out of the city, past suburbs that blurred into long stretches of highway. Caldwell finally spoke after nearly an hour. "Your father lives under a different name," he said. "Has for decades. He's been careful, very careful." "Does he know about me?" I asked. "He always knew. He just wasn't allowed to act on it." We stopped at a small roadside diner. Caldwell chose a booth in the corner, his back to the wall. Old habit, I realized, the kind you don't unlearn. "He's agreed to meet you," Caldwell said quietly, "but only under certain conditions." "What kind of conditions?" I asked. "No photos, no phones, no real names." I laughed without humor. "This sounds like a spy movie." "It's closer to a survival manual," he replied. As we left the diner, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Caldwell noticed it too. He didn't react, but his jaw tightened. "Is that normal?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "It's probably nothing," he said finally, "but stay alert." We reached a remote motel just before sunset. 1 floor, neon sign flickering. Caldwell checked in under a false name, then handed me a key. "He'll come to you," Caldwell said. "I won't be in the room." "You're just leaving me?" I asked. "This needs to be between you and him." I sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding, when a knock came at the door. I opened it. He stood there, older than the photo, lines etched by time and restraint, but his eyes were the same, familiar in a way that hurt. "Hi," he said.
I couldn't speak. "I'm sorry," he added softly, "for everything." We sat in silence for a long moment. "You're real," I finally said. He nodded. "And so are you." He told me about the deal, about watching my life from a distance, about my grandmother's strength. "She saved you," he said, "even when it cost her everything." I wanted to be angry. Instead, I felt hollow. Before he left, he said one thing that changed everything. "They're watching again." "Who?" I asked. He looked at the door. "Everyone who thought I was buried."
After my father left the motel room, I sat there long after the door clicked shut. The air felt different, heavier, as if the truth itself had weight. I kept replaying his words, "They're watching again," trying to understand who they were and why my grandmother had spent her entire life shielding me from them. When Caldwell returned, he didn't knock. He let himself in quietly, scanning the room before relaxing his shoulders. "You met him," he said. I nodded. "You knew he'd come." "Yes," Caldwell replied. "I also knew what he'd say." "That they're watching?" I asked. Caldwell didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat across from me, resting his briefcase at his feet. "Your grandmother believed secrets rot when left untouched," he said. "But she also believed some truths are dangerous until the right moment." I stood and began pacing. "You keep saying that, but no one is explaining who's dangerous." Caldwell opened his briefcase and pulled out another folder, thinner than the last but no less ominous. "This," he said, "is the part she hoped you'd never have to see." Inside were newspaper clippings, court filings, and handwritten notes. Names repeated across the pages. Corporations, shell companies, a financial network so complex it made my head spin. "Your father wasn't just a witness," Caldwell explained. "He was an architect. He helped build a system that moved money invisibly, offshore, untraceable. When federal investigators got close, powerful people panicked." "And my grandmother?" I asked. "She was leverage," he said quietly. My chest tightened. "They threatened her?" "They implied," Caldwell said. "Enough to make the message clear." I thought of her small house, her quiet routines, the way she double-checked locks every night. None of it seemed random anymore. "She made a deal," Caldwell continued. "Your father disappears. She raises you. No contact, no trace. In exchange, you remain untouched." "And now?" I asked. "And now the agreement expired. New people are digging, old files reopening." A knock suddenly sounded at the door. Caldwell stood instantly, hand raised for silence. He crossed to the door and looked through the peephole. "No one," he said, "but they wanted us to hear it." My heart raced. "So what happens to me?" "It depends," he replied, "on what you choose to do next." We left the motel before sunrise, taking back roads, changing vehicles twice. By midday, we were in a small rented house far outside the city. This is temporary, but it's secure. Inside, the house was sparsely furnished. No personal touches, no signs of life. It felt like a place designed to be left behind. "You're hiding me," I said. "I'm protecting you," Caldwell corrected, "the same way your grandmother did." That night, alone in the quiet, I finally read the rest of her letter. "I knew this day might come," she wrote. "If it does, forgive me for choosing your safety over your understanding. I would do it again, every time." Tears came then, slow and unstoppable. She had lived with fear, so I could live without it. The next morning, Caldwell returned with grim news. "Someone accessed your employment records," he said. "Another tried to pull your credit report." "They're already looking for me," I said. "Yes," he replied, "which means staying passive is no longer an option." "What do you want me to do?" I asked. He looked at me steadily. "Your grandmother left you more than answers. She left you control. He handed me a flash drive. Every document, every transaction, everything your father helped create, and everything that can destroy the people who used him. I stared at it. You want me to expose them? I want you to decide, Caldwell said, because once you act, there's no returning to anonymity. I thought of my grandmother's hands, of my father's life in hiding, of the normal future I had assumed was mine. If I do nothing, I asked, what happens? They keep watching, Caldwell replied, and waiting. And if I act? Then the truth comes out, he said, and so do the consequences. I closed my fingers around the flash drive. For the first time, I understood the burden my grandmother carried. Not just secrets, but responsibility. Okay, I said, tell me what I need to know. Caldwell nodded slowly. Then welcome, he said, to the life she tried to keep you out of. And in that moment, I realized the funeral wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of mine. The flash drive felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than data, like it carried decades of fear, sacrifice, and restraint. I turned it over in my hands, studying its plain black casing, trying to reconcile how something so small could upend so many lives, including mine. Caldwell didn't rush me. He never did. He simply watched, the way someone watches a bridge they know will eventually collapse. You should understand what you're holding, he said finally, before you decide how to use it. He connected the drive to a secured laptop and began opening files. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Dates, amounts, offshore accounts layered through shell corporations like a maze designed to defeat curiosity. Audio files followed, emails, signed agreements, names that appeared repeatedly, some followed by titles that made my stomach tighten. These people, Caldwell said, pointing, are not reckless. They've survived because they adapt. So exposing them won't end it, I said. No, he replied, but it will change the rules. We worked through the night. Caldwell explained which files were admissible, which could trigger investigations, and which could put me in immediate danger if released improperly. It felt surreal, learning how to dismantle a hidden empire while sitting in a quiet rental house that smelled faintly of disinfectant and dust. At one point, I stopped him. My grandmother, I said, did she know all of this was here? Yes, Caldwell answered. She insisted it remain intact. Why not destroy it? Because, he said, she believed silence protects individuals, but truth protects generations. That sounded like her. Near dawn, Caldwell received a call. He stepped outside, speaking in a low voice. When he returned, his expression was tight. They've made contact, he said. With who? I asked. With you, he replied, indirectly. He showed me his phone. An email had been sent to an address I barely used, one I'd given to no one recently. The message was short, polite, almost friendly. We understand you've come into some family matters. We'd like to help you navigate them. No signature, no logo. My pulse quickened. They know. They suspect, Caldwell corrected, and they're testing your response. What do they want? Control, silence, compliance. I sat back, staring at the screen. If I ignore it, they escalate, Caldwell replied. They always do. And if I respond, then you enter a negotiation you can't win. I thought of my father's eyes in that motel room, the cost of disappearing, of living half a life so I could live a normal one. I don't want to hide, I said quietly. Caldwell studied me for a long moment. Your grandmother hoped you'd say that, he said, but she also feared it. That afternoon, we met with a federal investigator Caldwell trusted, someone who owed his career in part to evidence my father had once provided. The meeting took place in a nondescript office building far from downtown. The investigator listened without interrupting as Caldwell laid out the history. When the flash drive was placed on the table, The room seemed to shift. "This changes things," the investigator said finally. "Enough to protect him?" Caldwell asked, glancing at me. "Yes," the investigator replied, "but not without fallout." "What kind?" I asked. "Media, legal pressure, people questioning your motives." He paused. "And people trying to discredit you." I nodded. I expected that. The investigator slid a document across the table. "If you proceed, you'll need to sign this. Full cooperation, full disclosure." I picked up the pen. For a moment I hesitated, not because I was afraid, but because signing meant accepting that the quiet life my grandmother built for me was over. I signed anyway. That night, Caldwell drove me back to the house. The world outside looked unchanged, cars passing, lights glowing, but I felt detached from it, like I was watching from behind glass. "Once this breaks," I said, "there's no going back." "No," Caldwell agreed, "but there is going forward." The next morning, the first warrant was issued. By afternoon, subpoenas followed. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. News outlets started calling it a reopening, then a revelation, then a reckoning long overdue. I sat in silence as Caldwell handled the calls. Late that night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Your grandmother was wiser than you." I showed Caldwell. "They're angry," he said. "That means it's working." I stepped outside and looked up at the sky. For the first time since her funeral, I felt something other than grief. Resolve. "I hope she's not watching this," I said. Caldwell shook his head. "She is," he replied, "and she's proud." As I went back inside, I knew the storm wasn't over, but I had stopped running. The day the story finally broke nationwide, I was sitting alone in the quiet house, drinking coffee I couldn't taste. The television was on, muted, showing my grandmother's photograph beside headlines she never would have wanted attached to her name. Words like whistleblower, hidden network, decades-long cover-up scrolled beneath her gentle smile. I wondered what she would think if she could see this. Caldwell stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the same measured tone I had come to recognize as his way of staying calm when everything else was burning. "Yes," he said, "he's cooperating fully." A pause. "No, he will not make a statement today." He ended the call and turned to me. "It's moving fast now." "How bad?" I asked. "Bad for some people," he replied. "Necessary for many others." Arrests began within days, not the biggest names at first, but enough to confirm that the evidence was real, undeniable. Financial accounts were frozen. Companies issued vague statements about internal reviews. Former executives suddenly retained lawyers of their own. And my father, no longer just a rumor, was officially acknowledged as a protected witness. The first time I saw him after everything went public wasn't dramatic. No cameras, no tears, just a quiet room in a government building and two chairs across from each other. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "Yes," I replied, "I did." He nodded slowly, accepting it. "Your grandmother always said you'd be braver than both of us." That hurt more than I expected. He told me he would remain under protection for the rest of his life. A different name, a different place. Some things even truth couldn't undo. "But you won't have to hide," he said. "That was the deal I never got." I thought of the life I had lost, the anonymity, the simplicity, and realized I didn't miss it the way I thought I would. The house was no longer safe after the investigations escalated, so Caldwell arranged for me to relocate. A small town, a new job, nothing glamorous, just distance. On my last night there, I packed quietly, stopping once to open my grandmother's letter again. This time, I read the final lines I had avoided before. "If the truth costs you comfort, forgive me. If it gives you purpose, remember me." At the new place, life slowly settled into something resembling normal. People recognized my name occasionally, but most didn't care. News cycles move on. They always do. What stayed was the change inside me. I stopped avoiding difficult conversations. I stopped choosing silence when something mattered. I learned that love, real love, isn't about shielding someone forever. It's about trusting them to stand when the shield is gone. One afternoon, months later, I visited my grandmother's grave. The stone was simple, just her name. No mention of what she carried. No hint of the storm she quietly endured so I could grow up unaware. "I know now," I said softly. "Everything." The wind moved through the trees, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from Caldwell. "Case is officially closed. You're free." I stood there for a long moment, letting that word settle. Free. My life hadn't turned out the way I imagined, but it had turned out honest. And in the end, that was the inheritance my grandmother left me. Not money, not secrets, but the courage to face the truth and live with it. And that changed everything, once and for all.
Thank you for watching and for taking away these life lessons. Please like, subscribe, and share our channel.